Eagles have some news. We'll dive into that. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen on Twitter. Give him a follow there for all his NFL news. And, of course, right now, post it at 97.3 ESPN.com. Who was spotted in the building? We've been talking a lot about wide receivers. They made an interesting move today by promoting a running back, Josh Adams, to the active roster. But to make him available, they released a receiver, DeAndre Carter, which means they only have 3 active receivers on the roster right now. So
not many options to throw to.
Not a lot of options there. Just 3 guys, 2 of which don't have a whole heck of a lot of experience. Kamar Aiken had one decent season a couple of years ago, 75 catches, 944 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Shelton Gibson has not done much. The other one is Nelson Aguilar. But could there be a familiar face on the way, John? Let's get your take on Josh Adams getting promoted. What does that mean? And were you surprised that it was DeAndre Carter who lost the roster spot?
Well, not really if you look at sort of the machinations that are going on. I mean, DeAndre was a great story, but I talked a lot about it, especially after week 1. You saw how many snaps he played. It's difficult for him physically at this level, even though he's extremely fast, he's extremely athletic, he's just so small. So he's kind of pigeonholed into a certain role that the Eagles don't necessarily need. And then the injuries start to happen. You mentioned they have 3 receivers. They actually have 5 on the roster, but Alshon Jeffrey, Mike Wallace can't play. So they only have 3 healthy ones, and something's got to give there. And Jordan Matthews was in the building today. Presumably he will be back. That'll be the receiver move. As far as running backs, Jay Ajayi, that back injury is going to be a bit of an issue. He mentioned using expletives, how blanked up he was after the game against Tampa Bay. So not sure he's going to be able to play this week. And you still have Darren Sproles with the hamstring. So that's the reason Josh Adams is up. A lot of moving parts with the skill positions of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, you mentioned that Jamie Apodi tweeted out that Jordan Matthews was in the building for whatever that's worth. Looked like he was there. Would that make sense? Of all the options out there, Matthews, Macklin, Des Bryant, Corey Coleman, you know the list, Kenny Britt, does Jordan Matthews the best fit, and does he have anything left in the tank? Here's a guy who got cut by the Patriots who are looking for wide receivers because he couldn't play.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think he's the best fit this week. I will say that because you're trying to get somebody in Wednesday to Sunday. So Jordan kind of knows the offense already. Remember, he was traded last summer along with the 3rd-round pick for Ronald Darby. Had an injury-plagued season in Buffalo, and as you mentioned, signed with New England, got cut there, and he's been on the street ever since. So he knows this offense, number one. He's extremely, extremely close with Carson Wentz off the field. They're really good friends. Number 2, so that plays into it as well. And as I said, it's tough to get anybody who's been outside the organization up to speed with practices on Wednesday and Thursday, and then a light practice on Friday and a walkthrough on Saturday. It's just not going to happen. So short term, I do think it's the best way to go. Long term, I don't know, because if Jordan Matthews is here, he's going to play in the slot. He doesn't have enough speed to play outside, and that means you're kicking Nelson Aguilar outside, and I don't think he's as effective out there. I don't think it'll be as bad as his first 2 seasons because he does have more confidence, so I think it will be improved, but I don't think that's the best position for him. So long-term, it's maybe more of a question mark.
John, Eagles healthy receivers, as we mentioned, Nelson Aguilar, Aiken, Shelton Gibson. They have a quarterback coming back for the first time in 9+ months. Darren Sproles is out. Ajayi is banged up. How the heck does Doug come up with a good game plan here that they're going to feel confident about going into this game?
You kind of got to fight through it, as Mike Groh talked today and said, and you got to feel your way through it. It's not going to be pretty until some of these guys get healthy, until you can get Alshon Jeffrey on the field. I do think ultimately Jordan Matthews will play this weekend.
Wow.
I don't know how much help will be, but and then we'll see if Darren Sproles is able to make it back. I don't think Jay Ajayi's going to play. I think that's the reason Adams is up. Yeah, there's some issues. I mean, there's just not a lot of skill position talent right now for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's how quick this sport moves. It's very fluid. This is the Super Bowl champions you're talking about, and all of a sudden you're looking up and saying the Indianapolis Colts, who, are considered certainly not a playoff contender. You could argue most people had them probably in the bottom third of the league, not probably. And you look at them and say they probably have more skill position talent right now. That's how quick this thing moves. And if you have injuries in the wrong spot, and a lot of them, the Eagles have a ton of injuries at receiver and running back.
John,
real quick too. By the way, it's been confirmed that Jordan Matthews did come in for a workout today. So the pictures and stuff is confirmed that he was there. So that looks like it could be the next step for Philly.
All right, bring him in. John, we asked you yesterday about Dallas Goedert, and I remember I asked you, should he be playing more? What are your thoughts on him? Mike Groh talked a little bit about him today at his presser. Is there any signs, or what are your thoughts on him seeing the field more this week?
Well, I talked about it a little bit yesterday. I think people are overreacting to that, and I compared it to Zach Ertz's rookie season, who they were both second-round picks, but at the time Zach was a much higher profile guy coming out of Stanford, was a higher pick, was regarded as a better prospect coming out of college. And in his first two games, he saw 30% of the snaps in week 1 and 20% in week 2. For Dallas, it's been 24 and 22. So it's not crazy. I mean, the people that assume you just hit the ground running as a second-round pick in this league, they don't understand this league. It takes a while. And Dallas is working his way. I think you'll see him play more as the season goes on, but you have the redundancy problems, and that's what the Eagles are trying to work out by turning him into a more in-line tight end. And if they're able to do that, they could get Zach Ertz and Dallas on the field at the same time. But that's a work in progress, and I do think he'll play more this week because he has to play more, because the Eagles have healthy tight ends. They don't have healthy anything else.
Sproles, the Adams signing, does that have any impact on Sproles, or do you think he'll be back and ready to play?
Well, we'll know better tomorrow when they're on the field. We'll see if he's back at practice. I think he's more likely to play than Jay Ajayi. I think that's the bigger issue. You might not have them both, and in that situation, obviously, that's a concern. But that's the reason Josh Adams is up, because there's a concern about Jay Ajayi and Darren Sproles. And I think you saw Corey Clement play very well. And I think you should be more comfortable at running back even without those guys, because Corey looks like he's ready for an expanded role, and he looks effective. He looks like he's got a lot of juice. He's improved dramatically as a pass receiver, so he can help you in both phases. I wouldn't worry about that as much as I would worry about receiver.
Yeah, and we told you about receiver. Jordan Matthews was in the building today. We'll see if the Eagles end up making a move there. John, you asked Jim Schwartz today about playing against Frank Reich. And, this is kind of an interesting situation that Frank obviously knows this team very well, and how, that plays into the game plan this week.
Yeah, and Jim kind of downplayed it, and he's right. I mean, coaches are a very tight-knit group, and they do have a lot of friends around the league. But I do think it's a bit different, because this is more than friends. I mean, these guys went against each other in practice and training camp and off-season work. for a couple of years, so they both know what each other does, and they both understand it very well. And it goes both ways. I mean, Jim knows Frank and vice versa. So it's going to be interesting to see who adjusts more, because obviously they know all the tricks they have. And I think that's one of the more interesting matchups to watch. It's not on the field, but you're going to see two really, really smart football minds trying to outsmart each other.
Hey, what's your take on Michael Bennett and his fit around here? There's been some talk that he is not the happiest camper. He's obviously not playing as much as he did in Seattle, but what's your read on Bennett?
Now, Mike's not happy, and for people who saw, I think it was the third or fourth defensive series against Tampa Bay, he had just gotten a hurry, and the Eagles took him off the field, and he was kind of yelling at Chris Wilson, the defensive line coach, as he left the field. He's used to playing a lot more snaps in Seattle in a rotational system. I think he's struggling with it here and playing a lot less, and he's pressing a little bit. And Michael today said he wasn't going to talk anymore. So it's getting to that stage where obviously something's going on. I think Chris Collinsworth mentioned on the national broadcast and in the first game that he's not happy about the rotational role. It's interesting because I talk to Michael a lot, but we never talk about football. He never wants to talk about football. The minute you start talking about football, he shuts down. We both like the same television shows. So we talk about Ozark and Jack Ryan on Amazon.
You're an Ozark guy there.
Ozark.
Don't give me anything away. I'm on season 1, episode 10.
And that's what we talk about. And he's a really good guy, and I know he's got this reputation, and that's not true, but he's a 3-time Pro Bowl player. And I think he played his snaps were in the 20s. I think 24. I don't have it in front of me.
24.
And he's not happy. He's not used to it. I think that's fair to say. And he shut down today, and we'll see if he changes his mind. But he claims he's not going to talk any longer.
Right, to the point where he could be a problem, or is he just going to kind of tuck his tail between his legs and keep his mouth shut?
No, I mean, on the field, he's a hard worker, and Jim Schwartz kind of said that. And when he's on the field, he gives us everything he's got. I don't think that part of it's going to change. But you always have to monitor a player who may not be happy. And I remember I asked this to Jim Schwartz over a month ago. I asked him how this is going to work out. How are you going to make everybody happy? And he downplayed it, and he said, one thing a defensive coordinator is never going to complain about is having too many pass rushers. And that's a great answer, but it also missed the point. It wasn't necessarily, is it a problem for you? It's how do you make those guys happy? And clearly, it's already a problem.
Yeah, what did Jim Schwartz say today about the secondary, John? And what are your thoughts leading into this game against the Colts? Are we going to see anything different personnel-wise, snap count-wise? Who lines up where coming off a poor performance this past week against the Bucs?
No, I mean, that group is pretty much settled, and they had a bad game. And Jim talked about the technique issues, specifically with the cornerbacks. I mentioned yesterday, I don't think Malcolm Jenkins, he's not going to have 2 bad games in a row. And then you have Indianapolis coming in, and hey, Andrew Luck is a great quarterback when he's clicking on all cylinders, but he hasn't played for a long time. This will be obviously his 3rd game back after the long layoff. And then I'll have Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson and O.J. Howard out there. I mean, T.Y. Hilton's a good receiver, but they can't match what the Buccaneers threw at the Eagles. So you're not going to see any issues. And then, by the way, the other part of it is Eagles are at home. And they play a heck of a lot differently on defense when they're at home versus the road.
He brought that up today, too. And he also brought up about the big play and he kind of cut the question right off because he was like, whatever, regardless, looking at the game tape, he said, he was like, this is a focus. He goes, it wasn't in this game. So evidently he was like, we understand we really didn't have the right preparation maybe for early in the game at least.
Well, I mean, from his standpoint, I think it was techniques. We talked about the first play a lot, and Malcolm admitted he made a mistake. They had a corner blitz on Ronald Darby, did not do a good job on the blitz, and Jim kind of chuckled today. Walking in the tunnel, everybody screams at him, blitz, 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 and people don't understand. Well, if you blitz, you leave yourself open on the back end, and if you don't get there, Deshaun Jackson's running 75 yards for a touchdown. That's why he doesn't like the blitz. That's why he wants, and not just Jim Schwartz, everybody in this league wants to get pressure with four guys for that exact reason. And sometimes you can't, sometimes you don't, and you have to blitz, and you have to call it at the right time, and you have to execute it. I don't think anybody executed on that particular play, and I think that was the bigger issue for Jim Schwartz.
John McMullen at JF McMullen with us here. What is your, now that Wentz is back, he's going to start, just the overall how he got himself to this point, like how he has himself ready to play. And from the sounds of Doug yesterday, and I believe Doug, I don't think they're going to hold back. I don't think they're going to ease him back. I think you're going to see them call a game like Carson Wentz, the MVP candidate, is playing quarterback. So just the reflection on how he got himself ready this quick.
Well, I think he's and Mike, from how long we've been talking about it, I predicted he'd be back week one early in this process, just from knowing Carson off the field and how hard he works. I mean, there was no doubt he was going to go the extra mile in the rehab, and he did. And Doug Peterson admitted yesterday that Carson believes he could have played a month ago. So I think he was ready week one, and the Eagles just held him back to that 9-month mark because they wanted to, and they felt that was the best way to go medically. And he's raring to go, and I think you're right. There is going to be no change from the typical Carson Wentz game plan. And to that end, I mean, I was talking to Nelson Aguilar today, and they're already talking about off-schedule offense. In other words, the extending of the plays and the realization that you have to be ready because there's an opportunity. You're going to have some of those Aaron Rodgers-like plays where everything breaks down and he makes something out of nothing. And that's, Nick Foles did a wonderful job as a backup quarterback, but that off-schedule offense did not exist without Carson Wentz. Now everybody thinks it's going to be back, even though it is probably going to take 12 months or 15 months till he's back to the pre-injury form.
John McMullen is with us. There's the Eagles news. They take on the Colts this weekend. What did Jim Schwartz have to say about Andrew Luck? He's kind of an interesting story. He missed all of last year. He's kind of in a similar situation than Wentz, but he started the season. But I can't imagine that he's the guy that was such an exciting player. The first couple of weeks he's been okay. He hasn't been awful. He hasn't been great. What does Jim Schwartz see with this version of Andrew Luck?
Well, he kept mentioning his completion percentage, which is 71%.
Yeah, him and everybody else.
Yeah, up in the entire league, in which I talked to him about that as well. But I don't think he is. And, there's a lot of comparisons between him and Carson Wentz. He was that type of quarterback. He was sort of that guy on the cusp of probably was already a superstar before the injuries took hold. And he was that type of guy. He's a big physical guy who can move and extend plays. And he's got that knack for keeping his eyes down the field, and he kills you in that way. But it's early in his return, and he was on the shelf even longer than Carson Wentz. So I think there has been some rust and they're slowly ramping up and hoping the old Andrew Luck shows up. And I think as long as his shoulder's okay, that's probably going to happen. And when it does happen, you're going to be talking about one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL.
If he can get back to that level, we'll see. It's the Eagles and the Colts this weekend. 97.3 ESPN has the coverage. Countdown to kickoff begins at 10 o'clock. Don't forget, Thursday night, Mosher, McMullen, and Krause at the Landmark. That starts at 6. You can check out that show every Thursday from 6 to 8 on 97.3 ESPN. What you think of last night, Mac? I saw you tweet that he was like Reggie White. There was what was the hybrid he was?
Deacon Jones and Lawrence Taylor, and he has been phenomenal. I mean, he has been an outrageous player, and that was a top 10 defense without him. So I don't think there's any question they have the ability to be a top 5 defense as he continues to play as one of the best 2 or 3 pass rushers in this league. But I keep saying, I don't care how good he is. They will not overcome that quarterback. That quarterback is not progressing nearly at the rate they would hope. And he's just struggling right now. Now, they were able to overcome Seattle because Seattle's offensive line is a mess. They had a ton of injuries on defense. But they're going to have a tough time with that quarterback unless the light bulb goes off and very, very quickly.
Yeah, and then Seattle on the flip side there on the Monday night game last night, that team, offensive line, a disaster.
You know, it's interesting because that even when they were winning the Super Bowl and almost winning a second one, that was always the weakness of their team.
Yep.
It's amazing you get certain organizations, for whatever reason, don't address certain positions. And to have Russell Wilson for that long and not build up an offensive line. I always say in this modern era of football that we're in right now where they've set records for completion percentage and passer rating through the first 2 weeks, everybody's completing passes all over the field. Look, you need the quarterback first. We all know that. But second, build up a good offensive line, and you will be difficult to stop. And the Seahawks have done a terrible job with that. And Russell Wilson, I think he's a great quarterback, but last night he was holding on to the ball a lot, trying to make plays. And when your offensive line is playing that poorly, some of it is on the quarterback. You have to understand situational football, and if they can't handle the opposing front, you got to speed things up. You got to get the ball out of your hands.
John McMullen, everybody, right here on the Sports Bash every day at this time. We talk Eagles and NFL. You can follow him at JF McMullen and check out all of his Eagles coverage at 973ESPN.com. He, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.